Beautiful hearts. We are excited to be here. We're talking about the sovereignty frequency, and this is the Edenic truth. What does that mean? We're going to talk all about it with my guest today, Victoria Hart. She is a harmonic seer, a visionary soul coach, and an intuitive energy alchemist. And we're going to hear her story and about the sovereignty frequency. Hi, Victoria. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, Lorraine. I'm excited for our conversation, and I've been in your audience for many years, so what a joy to be sitting on this side of the camera with you.
Oh, yes, what a joy. And I just love this topic, actually, the sovereignty frequency. So, we're going to talk about that because along the way, through the years, we've learned the wisdom is within us, right? Truly within us. And so, what does that mean? We're going to get there. But I first want to ask you about your personal journey of awakening. What was that like for you? Tell us about that. Did you come in awake and forget, or was there a traumatic or just a soft awakening? What was that like?
Oh, good question. And I think a little bit of both. I think, generally as children, I do think we come in awake. And then over time, as we become conditioned by our, caretakers and through the education system, we start to kind of shut down. And I feel like often we think of awakening as this like blissful, maybe a revelation. And for me, it certainly wasn't that. It was more like being kind of shaken awake, and then the glow up maybe came a bit later, and that was through a lot of deep inner work, looking at my patterns and behaviors and the conditioning, and really becoming really present and aware, and catching those kind of automatic responses, so that I could really start to align with actually what does feel true for me, rather than kind of what I'd learned from over the years.
Yes, and that leads us into this topic of sovereignty, frequency, what feels right for us. And there's a distinction there,
Mm.
isn't it? Because in our journey, would you say that so many of us look outside of ourselves? We want other people's advice. We want a counselor's advice, a psychic's advice. If there's something happening in our life, we want someone else to give us that guidance. But the sovereignty frequency says something otherwise, right?
Mm.
What is that?
Well, you're absolutely right. We come in, and from pretty much day one, we're kind of taught that we have to ask someone else's permission. We have to seek validation and acceptance, starting with our caretakers, our parents or caregivers, and then we go through school, and we have to raise our hand, ask for permission. And so that's kind of conditioned into us from an early age, and we're not taught at all how to trust our own inner guidance. And so, it kind of becomes we don't really know who we are, because we're constantly looking outside for that external validation. Um, and I guess when we're when we're not when we're not in touch with who we are, we don't really know, we're not able to recognize actually, is the guidance that we're receiving from others really true for us? Or are we kind of like following someone else's path before we even stop to recognize that actually this doesn't feel right for me? And so, it really begins with starting to access how we feel about something. And again, that's something that really was shut down. We were kind of taught not to feel, to suppress our emotions and just ride through it anyway. And actually, that for me was really the key to really start to feel again, to stop outsourcing my power to, external systems or to people, or really even to my former identities of who I thought I was. And so, yes, I feel that that's really the starting point, really starting to really feel, how do I feel in this moment and what really feels true for me?
And there's a lot going on there to determine how we feel in the moment. In your own journey, how did you deprogram from all that we've been programmed with?
Well,
What
it
does that
wasn't
look like?
overnight. Um, it was a long journey. I think, especially for me, I kind of grew up in an environment where there wasn't any like emotional intelligence really. It was quite, there was strong sort of narcissistic dynamics. So I'd really learned that I had to kind of be that caretaker, sort of read, like scan the room before I was able to scan myself. And so I really had to start checking in and scanning myself and recognizing what was my energy versus what was other people's, because that was really something I hadn't learned to distinguish, as a child and growing up, and certainly not even in, early adulthood. I would absorb everyone's emotions, and I would actually believe that that was me, and that maybe there was something wrong with me. And so it really took a lot of deep inner work to start to recognize, well, what is mine and what is everyone else's? And so I did a lot of energy healing work. I started to learn about, boundaries, which I didn't have any. I didn't know even what they were. And in the beginning, that was pretty scary, I guess. Learning to set a boundary felt very uncomfortable because, I was scared of uh, being rejected, being punished. It really kind of triggered those old tribal survival patterns that, if you didn't conform, then, you would be ousted, you'd be, yeah, you'd have to leave the tribe. And so that fear was really very real for me. And so really it was working that fear of really claiming my own voice and risk from what felt true to me rather than what I thought maybe other people wanted to hear or wanted me to be and do. So yeah.
How do you distinguish truth, your truth?
I guess it was starting to like the simple things where normally I would jump in and with a yes, I had to, learning just to pause before I even, I think that's
Mhm.
really, really powerful because we get so used to wanting to fill that gap with, and so it was getting used to being able to hold a space before I responded. And certainly in the early days, it might just be changing from, oh, yes, jumping in and people pleasing or caretaking to just saying, I'll think about that. I'll get back to you. And that for me started to certainly lower that kind of fear that I was holding in the body, so I started to feel more safe in order to be able to respond with what I really wanted to be able to do. And certainly in the beginning, it was a lot of saying yes to something and then backtracking at a later date, which I really, really didn't enjoy. I felt really bad that I would then maybe later cancel something that I'd said yes to because I didn't honor what I really meant in that moment. And so there was a lot of, digging myself out of holes, I think, in the early days, and then starting to recognize, did I feel into it? Did I really want to do or be in that situation, or was I just going along with it? And that really was the start of reclaiming my power, and reclaiming my voice, really.
That's what we all want. And so it's a deep journey of self-trust, isn't it? Trusting.
Absolutely.
And then what does the heart or the feeling in the body, how important is that? How do you distinguish the feeling in the body?
Great question. Um, Really. recognizing, and sometimes it was so subtle, and this is why it was a process for me, because, in the early days, you're not going to get it right all the time. And so it's really recognizing that gentle nudges of the body before I spoke. So, you'd start to feel that kind of contraction or pulling back. And that was a really key sign, before saying yes to something, if the body's starting to move back, then that's either a no or I'm not sure. And those not sures are also no's, certainly before you've, got clarity. So yeah, it's really trusting, first of all, the body's responses. And actually, I lived a long time in kind of chronic pain, which, it didn't really matter what I did to, I was trying to heal the body, but I didn't recognize for a long time that actually the body was holding all of those emotions where I'd overridden the body's wisdom, maybe said yes to something when I really meant no. And then perhaps there was then, the emotion that would then come up was maybe some resentment or maybe some anger even. And so all of those, what would be termed as maybe a negative emotion, was then kind of stuck as energy in my body. And so, for years I couldn't figure out why am I not, why is my body not healing? And actually, the greatest healing for me was to start acting on what the body was nudging me to do, and the rest then kind of followed. And I mean, this day, I still find that quite fascinating, because that was kind of like a rapid healing.
Wow. All right. As you're sharing, I'm reminded of a conversation just yesterday with a friend who was telling me that he made a decision because of, let's say, monetary. He needed a job, the project, and he took on a project because he needed the money. He said he needed the money. And he just was not feeling good about it. And as soon as he made the decision not to be a part of that project, he realized, wow, I feel actually relieved. And it's
Mm,
like, this is what we're talking about. His body, that's listening to the body, right? And so he felt a release of that stuck energy because he did it for the money, but it was dragging him down. And when
mm,
he made that decision that he didn't want to do it, it doesn't matter. He just said he felt this incredible relief. That's
yeah,
what we're talking about here, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's finding that joy and that peace in the body. If we're doing things that don't bring us certainly peace, and I think we can all relate to a lot of that, where we have said things or got involved in stuff that is just dramatic or, chaos. And actually, we really want to feel at peace within ourselves, that, peace that we've made the right decision. And following what lights us up. I say this a lot to my clients. It's seeing where we do things out of obligation, or we think we need something, so we'll do something. And often, we learn that difficult lesson, because we overrode what our body was really telling us. And perhaps if we had said no, because we were responding out of maybe a fear, or, that story you just shared tells me that that was a feeling of lack. So we were responding from fear of lack, and actually, we had to then backtrack. But when we can really respond from where we're being guided by the body's intelligence, then actually we can kind of avoid a lot of those, uh, taking the long route, and we can get a little bit more directly to the path we really want to be on.
So if someone is dealing, like you had dealt with chronic pain,
Mm.
or I know there's people in our audience who do experience pain or they receive a diagnosis. What would you say to them? What would be your best advice for them in that moment? Picking up the pieces, starting fresh, moving forward.
Mm. Well, I do feel like a lot of dis-ease, it starts as dis-ease, discomfort in the body, and then, can become dis-ease if we continually ignore the signs, the guidance that we're getting. even trauma. Many of us carry a lot of unhealed trauma that we're not always even aware of because it's become our normal. And just looping in those patterns is really often um, trapped frequencies, trapped emotions, trapped feelings that never got that voice, that never were given a voice. And so when we start to really feel what we previously unfelt, what we maybe suppressed, or we couldn't cope with it at the time, we didn't know how to deal with it, so we kind of just stuffed it down. When that starts to rise again, rather than keep stuffing it, if we can really sit with ourselves through that and be present. And it's not about, finding all the answers necessarily. It's just about giving ourselves that time, that space, imagining that, we're sitting with the younger version of ourselves or a little child, and just soothing the body first. I think for me, that is the first step for healing. It's kind of feeling soothed, feeling like, oh, that that pain has been now seen and heard, and then it gives it space to kind of to move. That energy starts to get unstuck in the body because it starts to um, have life again. I kind of think of it like, imagining the body's a circuit board, and each time we have an experience that doesn't feel good, it kind of gets stuck and trapped in the body, and so it blocks that life flow energy going around. And so each time we offer it space to move again, then we're getting our life force moving again, like the chi energy starts to move again. And really that is what offers us healing, I believe.
All right. Yes. Okay. Awareness, awareness,
Yeah.
awareness. And this is conscious creation of our life.
Yeah.
And you talk about the core truths of Edenic living. What does that mean? Can you share those with us?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really listening to, again, does this feel true to me? Again, rather than what I guess watching our kind of learned behaviors. And for me, the big ones were, that people pleasing, kind of performing our way through life rather than really being present in the moment in life. Maybe having allegiance to sort of systems that we no longer resonate with. So really starting to recognize, well, does this feel true for me? And then we can start to ask ourselves, well, do I feel nourished in this exchange? Because every interaction is really an exchange of energy. And do I feel nourished? Do I feel like there's reciprocity in this exchange? Or am I feeling a little bit siphoned or inferior? When we start to notice how we're feeling in our interactions, because when we come from that kind of conditioning of, oh, I must seek approval, then really what we're looking for is someone else to tell us, am I acceptable here? Can I do this? Am I allowed? And actually, when we start to really start to lead from our soul, from that Edenic truth, which is our soul's, our original frequency, then really all we need to ask ourselves is, am I being true to myself? And this is a really big one. Sometimes we think, yeah, yeah, I am. But, there's sneaky, there's little sneaky parts of ourselves that will even kind of lie to ourselves. And so, again, that's that making the stories, or dismissing the guidance, saying, oh, it will be okay, or, oh, maybe they're not really, whatever about another person, but just really starting to listen to that first hit. Am I being true to myself, or am I starting to dismiss and override the body's intelligence? And then asking, does does this feel aligned? Am I in alignment now, or am I leaning out of my body because I want something or I feel obligated? And you'll notice where the energy goes. And if you can feel that the energy stays in your body, that stays with you, you're not reaching out, then that generally tells me that, yeah, this is in alignment. I'm not seeking. Mhm.
Yes, all right. Oh, I can feel the questions from some audience members, and it's really, let's talk about boundaries
Mhm.
and creating boundaries, because this seems to be really important when we're talking about the sovereignty frequency. And isn't it interesting, like you had mentioned, the people pleasing,
Mhm.
that's a big one. Another big one is, wow, another huge one, and it's in my life as well as many in our audience, is caring what other people think,
Mhm.
right? Why do we care what other people think? Another one is, it's hard to say no, right? Why is it hard to say no? That's where we're really giving our power away. We are not loving ourselves if we cannot say no. That
Mhm.
the inability to say no is part of the people pleasing program, right? Wow. I think this is being experienced in the audience, in our beautiful audience here, and in the collective as a whole. Wow. We can see how we then lash out, or we react in ways that are not becoming. So what is your advice on how we turn the tides on this, how we stop caring what people think? And why is that so huge with light workers, do you think? And not being able to say no. Those two things are huge, don't you think?
I love that you brought those through because definitely these were some things that I think they came at the latter end of, working through the kind of conditioning. They seem to be more at the end of sort of freeing yourself, I guess. And, I think really we all just kind of want to be liked. I found it really difficult if people didn't like me. Like I I couldn't understand why not? Why doesn't somebody like me? What have I done?
Everybody must like us,
And
right?
then we wanted to kind of
Everybody.
fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a huge one.
Yeah. And I had to really recognize that, well, ask myself one, well, if everyone liked you, you wouldn't have enough time or, in your day to be liked by everyone. And
Okay.
so really it makes it more, you're able to make more relationships built more on quality and resonance rather than just being generally liked. That then narrows it down to being more unique, having that unique essence and resonating with certain people that you can match a frequency with. And like you said, even with the saying no, I think it's because we want to appear nice. We want to be liked and we want to be nice. And I think the truth that landed with me was really about being kind. And I had to see that actually there's a difference between being kind and being nice. Being nice is where we give our power away because we want to, please somebody else or make them feel more comfortable. And that also comes with us sort of dimming our light a bit. You said about light work, and sometimes we dim because we think if we speak our most honest truth, maybe that other person, wouldn't be able to receive that very well. And so we filter it and soften it. But actually, that really I learned is not doing a justice, not only to ourselves, but to that other person. And there's ways of being kind. We don't have to be unkind, but being truthful without being mean is kind and loving. And sometimes the kindest thing we can do is actually set a boundary and say, actually, no, that doesn't feel good to me, or I'm not, I'm not, I'm not going to do that. It doesn't mean I don't love you. And actually, that gives that person an opportunity to step into their own sovereignty. And again, because it's, a two-way exchange, if we're saying, thank you, but no thank you, that gives that other person an opportunity to see, well, are they in alignment? Why do they need you to, agree with them? Perhaps, if that was uh, the dynamic. So I think
Yeah.
saying no is actually a powerful act to your soul, and also an act of love to the other.
That is so beautiful. Okay, I just want that to soak in a little bit because I'm actually going through something where I need to say no. I need to say no.
Mm.
And so realizing that we can say no, again, I don't want to hurt another person, but it's like, wow, I can see where I'm hurting myself by not saying no. And so finding that delicate balance would be to really be coming from the heart and having good communication, right?
Right.
To be able to say, I love you, but no.
And actually,
That
that
takes bold. I mean, that feels really bold right there.
absolutely, and and as I said earlier, sometimes in the beginning that can feel quite scary because we're not sure how that no is going to be received. Maybe that
Yeah.
person will get angry with us or reject us, and that's another layer of really being able to trust yourself and letting go of that whole caring about what the other person thinks. It's a big one, and it's not comfortable all the time, but it also means, like you said, really honoring our own soul. And maybe that other person might be upset to begin with, but really that's where your responsibility ends. You're not responsible for how that person receives your no. And maybe they'll come around and come back later. Maybe they won't. But maybe that was also the path. Maybe that was the the lesson, or the what you both came to teach each other. We don't know. So yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful. And I'm reminded that, you know, um, again, part of that people pleasing, you don't want to uh, keep someone, you don't want to keep someone from their own awakening. Um, and let me paraphrase that by saying, you don't want to protect, oftentimes we want to protect someone, but like you said, that's not our job. Our job is not to protect someone from um, whatever they may be feeling by us saying no. All right. And so another aspect of this would be that, okay, so we can't keep them, we can't protect them from their own awakening. And oftentimes when people get angry with us, like for a healing practitioner, you work with clients, you know this. Sometimes a client needs to, in our client patient relationship or facilitator client relationship, um, things need to be said that may not be comfortable. And that could trigger the client in an angry way. And that's another part of awakening, isn't it? Because if sometimes it's that anger that needs to come forward from within that other person for that other person to take that deep look within. What do
Yeah,
you think about this?
absolutely. And I often say we don't really awaken until without some friction, because we
Right.
wouldn't turn it inwards if there wasn't some friction. And so that little rubbing up, it gives us that opportunity to, and in the initial stages, we will be like, oh, they did that, or you did that. And actually, when we turn it back on ourselves and say, well, what boundary did that person cross, or did I not speak up that is causing me to react in this way? And usually it's, a self-betrayal, usually more than what the other person did or didn't do. And that's part of the journey, certainly that I took, to start to see, well, where, and I started to actually see that there were many lines that were crossed before we got to that stage. I just hadn't been paying attention.
So this is all about paying attention. And so let's recap this here. Um, give us the importance. We we feel into our bodies. We're looking for that joy,
Mm.
right? We're looking for that elatedness. Um, Maybe you could share with us how you start each day. How do you get yourself in alignment each day? How do you clear out anything that may be peeking its way in so that you can be in alignment and follow the codes of your body, the signals of your body for joy?
Well, I just feel like I need to first share that, for a long time, I would be in like my previous job, pushing and struggling and striving to get somewhere to make it a success. And, I did this for years, thinking that that was part of the way you made things happen, and it had to be a real hard grind. And actually, looking back, it was because it was hard because I was going in the wrong direction. And so, as you asked, when we start to recognize, is this bringing, is this lighting me up? Is this bringing me joy? Or does this feel heavy? Does this feel like too much hard work? And, both myself and clients will often say, I wake up on that Monday morning, it's usually a Monday, wake up on that Monday morning with that feeling of dread, and it's like, oh, what am I going to do today? How do I earn a living? All of these fears and worries. And often, or I certainly started to see that when we're in that space, it's because we're really not on our aligned path. And so, in answer to your question, now when I wake up, I certainly start with some breath work. I start to really just get really present in the body, grounding. A lot of the time I didn't ground, and I would find that I would feel like I was never really stable or steady. You kind of feel like you're sort of floating because you weren't anchored and supported and really embodied. And of course, when you're not in that embodied state, it makes it more difficult to make choices and decisions that are in alignment because your energy is kind of scattered. So it's really bringing that energy, being fully present, and coherent so that you can make aligned choices. And I made a decision quite a few years ago now, certainly when I started working for myself anyway, that I wasn't good at that 9 a.m. start, right? For me, I needed a slower morning where I could really give attention to myself, maybe do some exercise, certainly get out for a walk with the dog, really get in touch with nature, really get in touch with my own nature. And that's when I then was ready to serve someone else. And I started to recognize that, until there's that saying, you fill your cup first and then you can offer it to someone else. And, that is just so, so true for me. And I'm sure for many people, really tending to your own needs first, so that then I can show up and fully be able to give from an overflowing cup.
Yes, that is so beautiful. And you mentioned that when you were working in the old job, and I remember me too. I come from journalism in the newsroom. Oh my God, that was not your own life at all. And no time to even stop for lunch or use the bathroom most of the days. But I'm no longer in that, and it's interesting. And so when you extracted yourself from that, and when people extract themselves from that programming of get up and go, show up
Mm.
at work, punch the clock, it's 5 o'clock, now you're out of there, that sort of thing, there's a lot of programming to decompress from, right? Because when you did start taking that time for yourself in the morning, wow. I mean, I can feel that now. It feels very liberating. Sometimes we get butterflies in our stomach. I can feel some who are still going to jobs that they want to be free of, that they're thinking, wow, if I didn't have to go to, wow, I can feel the butterflies. That's that joy we're talking about. But there's a mind program that comes in. Did you ever have that where you felt guilty
I was
for
just going to say.
exercising? You felt there's a little bit of guilt, like, and there's a program. I have to work hard. I have to be at my desk at 7 a.m. And right. How did you overcome that? Or did that slowly, because you were able to notice your vibration and how efficient you were at the office with your clients when you did align in that way? Is that what
Mm.
happened, that you noticed it that way? Because those are huge programs to get over, and they're literally in the body as well. I remember feeling really guilty for exercising before I even, right? And so I wouldn't for a while. How did you do it?
Well, that's the exact word, Lauren, guilt. And it was, I think it was more when I was transitioning because I also worked in television for a while. And when I
Stressful,
first
huh?
started doing, yeah,
Yeah, very stressful.
well, it's, and it's go, go, go all the time. And,
Very
we're
ego, very ego.
very, very much. And, we're kind of conditioned that if we're not always on the go and busy and doing, then there must be something wrong. And I've talked about this recently actually. It was like when you say, "Oh, how is your day?" and people say, "Oh, I'm really busy." And the response generally is, "Oh, well, that's good." And I started to think, well, is it? Is it good that I'm always busy? So, I had maybe pause and think about that for a moment for yourself if you're listening. But in the early days when I was transitioning from that career to what I do now, and I had, more time, I guess, available. And so I would take myself off and lay on my bed and read a book for an hour. And in the beginning, oh my God, I kept, looking at the clock. I was like, oh, wanting to get up and go and be productive. Certainly from the corporate world, I'd been at a desk for what, 8 hours a day, and that's how I tried to do my other job, my independent job. It was sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, and then getting frustrated with myself why I wasn't being creative. And I realized, well, you're sitting in this kind of sterile environment. Of course, the creativity is not going to be flowing. And that's when that's also when I started making that rule that I wasn't going to serve anyone else until I'd served myself. And I find that my creativity pops in when I'm out walking the dog, when I'm out in nature. And then I come back and it's like, I can do an 8 hour work day in 4 hours because, I'm not
Mhm.
sitting here trying to force it to happen. It's just naturally like coming in. So yeah, so like you really had to overcome that guilt, and it did take a little while. And now I see it's about having that balance, and I feel that that's also, having returning to that Edenic truth and that inner sovereignty is the balance of being still, being in that feminine flow, and then taking the action, which is the masculine energy. So you're kind of combining both energies. It's not just leaning towards one predominantly. It's knowing, which energy you need in that moment, and then acting from that.
Yes, all right. So good. And the good news is, for anyone experiencing that, is it does go away. We do disentangle from those programs because we see the results.
Yeah, and I'll just add
We,
actually, it's not that I think one of the fears I had was there wouldn't be enough hours in the day to get what I needed done or, you know, and I really had to train myself that here's a good example, I think. In the beginning when I started get emails in, I thought I had to reply straight away. So I was constantly, responding to whatever was coming into my inbox. And I had to train myself that do I need to respond? Does this need a response right now or even at all? Can it wait? And learning what gets your priority really. And the priority really is self first.
I love that. I do love that. And there was I think one of these self-help authors said, never check your email in the morning. And that's a good tip. That's a good tool because that just distracts us or it pulls us right in and there we go. And I like to say that the day steamrolls. The
Hmm.
day will steamroll when we're living in this frequency. And by that, I mean, it picks up its pace with our energy. It does, it picks up its pace, and we know what to do and we know how to, but first we do have to align our energies, and give fill our own cup up first so that we can have that energy to go forward in that day very efficiently, I would say. So awesome. Okay. Well, this is beautiful. And I know that people want to work with you. And you have ways that people work with you. We are going to be promoting a master class with you. There's 2 classes in this one, and there's also a personal session.
Mm.
So it's available just the master class, or you can do the classes and a personal session with you. Can you tell us what we're going to learn in the master class? 2 of
Mm.
them.
Yes, so it's a two-part live masterclass, which I've called the Sovereignty Frequency. And so it's really about guiding people to get that felt sense of what it means to live in your true power and presence. So the first masterclass, I'm going to be gently guiding people into that deeper soul embodiment, and really starting to activate the original codes of who they truly are. And so that really for me is about harmonizing both spirit and matter. You know, we are both spirit and we are human in this physical form. And so that for me is the sovereignty frequency. And then in the second masterclass, I call it the liberation map. And it's really when we start kind of disentangling from the unconscious programming, not just in our immediate kind of dynamics, you know, what we've talked about a lot today, but also which I kind of call the matrix systems, you know, the collective agreements which we have just accepted as, well, this is the way life is. So really starting to look at, well, where are we still bound? Because, you know, we can't really say that we are sovereign and free if we're still operating in these unconscious agreements. So, you know, emotional, financial, even kind of spiritual forms of what I call like enslavement, that we don't often realize that we've agreed to. So it's really starting to exit those with grace. You know, we're not fighting a system and we're not trying to escape life. It's really about learning how to hold a new way of being on, you know, in Earth, on Earth. That's how I kind of look at it. So not about transcending the human experience, but really learning how to really live it and inhabit it fully. And then, of course, as you shared, there's an opportunity to also work one-on-one with me, where we can really kind of get deep into maybe what your unique hooks are, or where you're entangled in something that you can't quite see yourself. So I'll help you kind of unpick that. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's highly supportive at this time. I
Mm.
know many are really ready to just break free from it, to get unstuck in many ways. And this is really what keeps us stuck. It's this programming and the unconsciousness of our programming. And so we're just bringing more awareness to it so that we can embody this
Yeah.
frequency and live this frequency. I love how you said that you really are going to activate the codes of who we came here to be. That's really powerful. And we know that deep within us. And so this is a journey of remembrance and
Mm.
empowerment on that. Thank you so much for it. You also have a light encoded bonus, an audio transmission called The Voice of Sovereignty. Tell us about this.
Yeah, it's a guided journey that I recorded, and it really helps you start to recognize, well, what does it mean to live in sovereignty? Recognizing that actually, you know, sovereignty isn't loud. You know, we think of sovereignty really from, you know, the patriarchal conditioning that we've had, that we kind of associate with that masculine um, charismatic energy, let's say. And actually, for me, true sovereignty is um, it's quiet, it's soft, it's gentle, it's not overpowering. It's really uh, getting into that stillness. And as we've shared in this conversation, starting to recognize, well, what is the body nudging me to say, be, or do in this moment? And starting to recognize our own inner voice amongst, all the noise. So really stepping out of that distortion and starting to become truly from presence and from alignment. And so when we can really access that, we learn to be able to speak our truth um, without kind of dimming, which we talked about earlier. Um, shift it. And initially, sometimes when I was certainly starting to learn to use my voice again or find my voice, it would come across as a bit like passive aggressive. I didn't know how to communicate in a assertive but also kind way. So it will help us really accessing that kind of voice that doesn't need to convince or push, but really just stands in our truth, in our presence. Um, and really, I think once we access that frequency, because that to me is what the new earth is. We're not going somewhere. It's about living in our original frequency as our divine or Edenic blueprint, I guess. And so I would also say that, it helps us navigate that more easily because people think of Eden as being, this paradise, but, Eden still sometimes bites. And it's not to say that, we've done something wrong or that it's trying to, there's something out there trying to harm us. It's really, testing us. Where am I? Am I in alignment? Am I speaking my truth? Or am I having to learn another lesson because I didn't listen to my body's nudging in the beginning? And so it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of see it as like a little test. So when we're practicing the voice of sovereignty, we might rub up against things and it might not always work out first time, okay? But it's really learning that each little tweak, each little time that we adjust and tweak and step into that space, we're able to hold that frequency more frequently. And that for me is real true empowerment.
And when we do it in a group setting, the group energy amplifies the entire experience. And when people share what they're going through, I love the sharing in the webinars like this in the Q&A, because that allows others to turn and look at their experience and understand their experience a little bit more. So it just supports and amplifies the whole experience. So
Yeah.
this is really beautiful. Thank you for that. I want to direct everyone watching and listening to the link on this webpage. Scroll down and you'll see these options. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find the link in the description box, and we invite you to register. This is a frequency experience. It is a shifting of your frequency into embodiment. You're already connected to these frequencies. Victoria is going to simply assist you in anchoring them more, getting used to what they are, navigating that, sharing from your experiences, and truly living and walking your sovereignty frequency. So that is beautiful. And I do have to say, when you take a time in a personal session, that's just personal one-on-one attention that absolutely is so beneficial on your personal journey. So again, thank you for those personal sessions. That's an option for people, or just the webinar as 2 classes. So that's all available, and we're excited for that. All the details are below. Replays if you can't join live, but try to be there live, because that's where you come home. That's where you meet other people. Friendships develop that way. And it's just so lovely to be in a space like this. So thank you. Is there anything else you want to add about this beautiful opportunity, Victoria?
Um, yeah, just again, like you said, when we're in that group, um, we're able to have that reflection, and so it helps us to um, really inhabit fully what it means to live in that frequency. And I kind of think of it like an Edenic economy, even because it's learning how to um, exchange energy with other people in reciprocal ways. We're stepping out of transactional exchanges into more resonance. And so if we don't know our own frequency, we're not really going to be able to navigate the world or our path with greater ease, because that's when it's easy to get pulled into, other people's stories or narratives, because we don't know our own truth. And so the more we start to recognize our own truth, and to start, you know, recognizing, is this reciprocated? That really is the key. Does this light
Mm.
me up? Do I feel joyful around this other person, or does it feel heavy? And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that other person. It just means that we're not a vibrational match. We're not meeting each other at the same frequency, and that's okay. Wish them a good day, and we walk on by. Um, yeah, and so I feel like it's recognizing that we don't have to fit with everyone else. It's about recognizing that we all belong when we actually come from our own uniqueness. That really, for me, is what's really special.
You're doing a wonderful job helping people live this way in a New Earth fashion, in an Edenic fashion. And that is just wonderful. And that's your passion. And that is so beautiful. Congratulations on your work. And everyone, you can feel your heart resonance with this, your soul resonance with this. If it's time to join and experience this opportunity to accelerate your journey, to accelerate your embodiment, to live sovereignty in your life. We are so grateful for you watching and joining today. And we are looking forward to supporting you in all ways living in the heart. Victoria Hart, thank you so much for being here. This has been beautiful and wonderful. And I
Oh,
thank you, thank you, thank you.
thank you, Lorraine. Real pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Again, you can check out Victoria's special offerings on the link on this webpage. Thank you so much for watching. Namaste. This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.